Welcome to the Badass Dad podcast, where we are a band of brothers committed to forging stronger fathers. Hey, thanks so much for listening to this episode. This is being brought to you by the generous donations of the people who have made contributions at our website, which is BadAssDads.org, BadAssDads.org. You can also find some promotional shirts and other ways to support the podcast as well. But just want to thank you guys so much for your support. Enjoy this episode. Welcome to the Badass Dad podcast. KDH here on the microphone, quarantined on this April 5th Sunday. And man, surviving out here. So much is changing in the world, in and around us. But very excited today to have my good friend via Zoom, Darius Wise, on the microphone and in front of the camera as well. So we're on YouTube now. I don't know if you knew that or not, but we're on YouTube as well. So people are going to get to see it. Yeah, so you're going to have to follow us for sure. So
you should say, I will follow. I mean, you should say you're not just quarantined, but you're quarantined with a dog.
Oh, okay. All right. So we're gonna start there. You want to start there? All right. So for those of you listening, it's been more than 25 years since I've had a dog, and so we've been quarantined. Crazy situation. Neighbor has an extra dog that she got. Totally sad situation. So my oldest, is dog sitting and taking him for walks and everything. A week later, needless to say, we have a dog. Okay. And I was worn down. I was
and listeners, all you from all around the world, you should know that I'm a dog lover. And Kevin and Gretchen Harper have been friends of ours, and our kids are friends the whole nine. And Kevin has sworn that he was not getting a dog. And here he is with a dog. He couldn't resist, man. I love it. I'm so happy for you guys.
Well, thank you. So much is happening and changing. I'm going to give a little shout out here as well. So Aaron and Benta Clark, I did a recording with Aaron. I was supposed to record him earlier today also, but I did one with him about adoption, kind of the early steps of adoption. They got a call a couple of weeks ago, and actually I didn't get to record them today because their baby daughter was born this morning, so they were at the hospital there. So congratulations, Aaron and Benta Clark. Congrats. Yes, on the new baby. But hey, let's get into you, Darius. Start with little Darius Wise, growing up in Detroit, Michigan. Tell us a little your story and kind of take us through Georgia and all the way how you get to Colorado and kind of catch us up.
Absolutely, man. So born and raised Detroit, Michigan. Love the city. Go Pistons. Go Lions. Go Blue for all you Michiganders. And was in Michigan till about 15 years old. My parents divorced early. So from a, broken / blended family, if you will. Father remarried, inherited 2 stepbrothers. Love those guys to life. Got into what was, I was 10 when my father remarried. And so when my stepbrothers came into the picture, they were, I think one was 14, the other one was 16. And so I was the 10-year-old little young guy trying to keep up with the older guys. And so I ended up getting into a lot of trouble. My mother had moved to Atlanta, Georgia, at that time. Before, when I turned 10, my mother moved to Atlanta. So I grew up from about 10 to 15 in Michigan, and ended up, I walked into the house high, me and my brothers, and my stepmother with godly woman, with so much foresight, looked at me and said, look, either you're going to wind up dead or in jail. And I believe God has a special call on your life. And so if you come into this house high one more time, she did it like a black soulful mother would. She didn't say it as nicely as I'm saying it now. She said, if you come into this house high one more time, I'm going to send you to Atlanta to live with your mother, your biological mother. And I came into the house high again, and I was in Atlanta probably the next week. I picked up the phone and called my mom, who I hadn't spoke with in years, and said, hey, can I come live with you? She said yes. but my lifestyle was the same. I grew up in church. My first drug problem was my parents drugged me to church. So, you know, I had grown up in the church, and I say it this way, that I knew of God, but I didn't know God. And got to Atlanta, change of scenery, much slower pace than the city of Detroit, obviously. And wound up the first time I was 11th grader, first time I took drugs to school with an attempt to sell them, I got caught, which was the best thing for me. And so got walked out of my cafeteria in handcuffs. I remember that day like it was yesterday, man. And spent the next 3 days in a jail cell, very small juvenile detention center jail cell. Called my mother the first day. She just told me I had to stay 3 days. They told her she could come pick me up. That gives you insight to my biological mother. She was a tough cookie, man.
Yeah, a little tough love.
Yep, a little tough love. And so I had time to think. And she was a godly woman, so she knew what she was doing. She was praying for me during that time frame. And so literally the second day I was sitting in the jail cell thinking to myself, man, I don't want to spend the rest of my life this way. And so Jesus, I'm going to try you at your word. I know you have a purpose and plan for my life. I know you want relationship with me, and I've been running from you. So I had the very, very, very powerful moment sitting in that jail cell of just a surrender moment to God, and said, Lord, I'm going to try you just as hard as I've been running after this street life. I'm going to run after you. I'm going to give my life to you. I'm going to give my all to you. And man, that was the catalyst for me. So I got out of jail. My mother finally came and got me. No, I had my court date. The judge looked at me and said, hey, you've got a lot of people here speaking on your behalf. I had elders from the church that my mom was attending. My mom had all of her prayer group there. My stepfather was there. And they just said, look, the judge said, look, you seem like a fine young man. I'm going to give you an opportunity to do community service and expunge your record. So you will not have a record. And so I did community service for 90 days at the local church that my mom was attending. Now get this, the 25,000 member church. And I had no idea. Yeah, I mean, I had no idea who these folks were, but I had just surrendered my life to Jesus. And so the guy who was the head janitor was also the senior pastor's, what you call personal assistant, armor bearer, if you will. And Monty Campbell, a dear friend of mine to this day, discipled me in the Word of God. I mean, he taught me the scriptures over cleaning the church, literally for 90 straight days. And
cleaning toilets,
cleaning
offices,
sweeping floors, mopping floors, cleaning offices, emptying trash cans, you name it. And this is a pretty big church. And so I had my work cut out for me. And man, I just got serious about serving the Lord, and serious about his purpose and call on my life, and serious about seeing other people come to Christ. And so from about second semester, junior year, had to go to night school to finish school on time. I mean, the lessons that I learned in that time frame were lifelong lessons of what it would take to really be a man and be a leader. To first learn to lead yourself, and then second, how to steward influence. So over the next probably year and a half, man, I got serious and graduated high school, got accepted into a college, and kind of fast forward from there, met my wife my freshman year of college, but I had already committed to not dating, and because I was serious about school at that point, and ended up dating my wife anyway. There's something about this 4-letter word called love that makes you do things you didn't intend to do. And so Shajay and I started dating, and we dated all the way through college. And here we are 21 years later, man, married with 4 kids, accepted my first job into local church ministry. So the irony of that story was the church that I was cleaning up, I ended up pastoring. I ended up being the executive pastor at a.
Wait. So basically, from below janitor
Yeah.
to like you're number two, right?
Literally,
I mean, like,
yeah.
that's amazing.
Yeah, really beautiful story. But I mean, that didn't happen without the pastor then really believing in me and seeing something in me and wanting to develop and mentor me for years, literally 11 years, man, of walking alongside him and seeing local church done, both the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so, again, going back to my wife, 21 years later, here we are, married, 4 kids, living in Denver. In the interim, pastored at New Birth for, 11 years. So the very church that I was cleaning up ended up becoming the executive pastor. And the gift of pastoring at New Birth, this was a church of 25,000 people, hundreds of volunteers, literally about 150 staff members. The gift of serving that church was learning the ins and outs of what local church was all about. Serving the community. I've never served at a church that's been that outwardly focused on helping others and empowering the community. And so, just a gift to serve in that church, to serve in that place for the 11 years that I was there. Ended up, I'll never forget, man, I was on a trip to South Africa it was myself, my then pastor, and just a delegation of us in South Africa. We had eaten dinner, a great South African dinner that night. And we're trying to walk off our food. So it's late at night. We're kind of walking around the hotel that we're staying at in Joburg. And he says to me, he's like, hey, man, I think, obviously you're executive pastor here. You're 20. I was probably about 26 years old at the time. And he goes, I think it's time to plant you. Now, I think I was probably about 28. So I think it's time to plant you. He said, I see the call of God on your life. I'm not retiring for several years, and you need to lead. I think you need to lead your own church. You need the experience of what it's like to lead your own church. And I'm like, part of me is like screaming inside, excitement. And then the other part of me is shaking in my boots because I'm scared as all get out. I don't know what that means. I'm like, what? I've only pastored on this platform, speaking to 8,000, 10,000 people at a time. And that was probably the first time that I had both equally felt excitement and fear, and so we over probably about the next year, we processed what it would be like for me to be an extension community of New Birth in the city of Denver, and ended up making that decision to pastor New Birth Denver. Right before I left to pastor New Birth Denver, I was getting ready to plant the church. The church went into a massive, just PR nightmare, and decided to not not pastor New Birth Denver, just based on some of the things that were happening in the church, and really just kind of a moral failure on his end. But so he and I both decided that, this isn't the time for you to launch a church. I really feel like, this is the time for me to, I was in a new city, new people, didn't want to launch a church under the umbrella of what was happening there in Atlanta. And so just decided that, man, I'm 28 years old and want to really explore more of who I am, who God's called me to be, and had always felt compelled and called to plant a church, but just knew that timing wasn't right. And so a friend of mine, this guy by the name of Kevin Harper, invited me to his church because in fact, I think it was Gretchen who invited us first to Denver United. But anyway, she's like, man, you guys got to meet our pastor. He's a great guy. I think your stories align a lot. You both pastored at pretty large churches in your 20s. And we're 3 years into a church plant, and I think you guys would love it. And I think it'd be safe refuge for y'all during, as you figure out what's next. And the rest is history, man. Rob and I met that next day, I think probably a few days later, and ended up falling in love with the guy, fell in love with the heart of the church, the direction of the church, the vision to unite across the spectrum, the spectrums of our society that divide us, to build a multicultural, multi-ethnic worship expression. And so for the next year and a half, Rob and I grew as friends and brothers, and then decided that we wanted to partner up and start working together. So Rob hired me as the executive pastor at DU. Really at that time, probably a 95%, 97%, high 90s, all white church.
Yes.
I go from pastor.
Well, but it's Denver. Come on now.
Exactly.
You're in a very white neighborhood anyway.
I'm in a very white community, right?
Yes.
And so I go from pastoring a 99.9% black church in Atlanta, and then move to Denver, and I'm pastoring at basically an all-white church. So
I think that's when I told you, just make sure you don't forget being black. I think I said something like that to you.
You did.
Yes. Yeah.
You did, bro. You said, hey, look, man, I'm glad you're here. And I actually like you here because you're black.
Yes.
And so, it's funny. Rob and I had a kind of a come to Jesus conversation when we sat down, and we were thinking like, all right, this is going to be a thing. I said to him, I was like, look, I said, bro, I just want you to know, like, I'm really black. And he did what you did. He burst out laughing. And he said, good, man. I'm glad you said that, because just so you know, I'm really, really white, Yes. And so you got this, you had this really beautiful partnership, man, of two men, me getting to serve alongside of a church, and two men who love God and love the multicultural expression of Jesus's church. I'm a big proponent that Jesus's church isn't there's not going to be a white section in heaven and a black section and a Latino section and a Asian, so on and so forth, right? Like the Bible says, every tongue, every tribe, every nation worshiping our God together. And so that's what we sought to build over the last 7 years, and we got to do that. When I left Denver United in October of 2019, our church is probably now about I'd say 75 to 80% white, and the other is diverse. And those are pretty cool statistics in the city of Denver when you're talking about a 64% white city. And so, man, got to build the kingdom of God in a special way at that church the last 7 years. And now, man, here we are. I really sense God speaking to me probably a year and a half ago around switching gears and moving into what was next. But the challenge is I had no idea what was next.
What was next? Yeah.
My idea of what's next was what I thought could happen. And oftentimes, I think that's the way that we function, right? Like, if we can control it, we're comfortable with it. But when we get into the space of like, okay, God, you're actually calling me into something that is far beyond my imagination and far beyond what I could orchestrate myself. And so what I thought concerning next was like, okay, good. It's time to go plant, man. It's time to plant that church that it's been in my heart for decades. But I didn't sense God's go on that. I really, we explored options of pastoring churches in different parts of the country, and really felt like God was still wanting us here in Denver because we love this place. And our kids told us no. They told us we couldn't leave. And I was talking to a mentor friend of mine, and he said, This guy by the name of Pat Ahern, dear friend of mine and mentor for the last several years, and was confiding in him about kind of, hey, I'm really starting to sense a stirring towards what's next, and don't know where that is, don't know what that's going to look like, but man, could you be praying with me? And he goes, Darius, I think I'm going to complicate matters for you, but the last 2 years, God has placed you on my heart to be praying about you being my successor where I am, and coming on board, and even before all of that, coming on board and being my number 2 at the credit union. Pat's been the president and CEO of Red Rocks Credit Union for the last 26 years. I mean, the guy he's the picture of, Siri thinks I'm talking to her. Pat is the picture of consistency and faithfulness in one direction. Eugene Peterson talks about obedience in the same direction, and long, hard obedience in the same direction. And Pat is that, man. He's just a pillar of consistency and obedience, man, and faithfulness to God. And he's a really good leader, sound thinker, and a guy I've grown to respect. And so when he asked me about coming on board and being his number 2, I thought, first I laughed. I mean, I thought, no way. I mean, there's no way I would think about, I mean, you talk about going from being, an executive leader in a church to an executive leader at a bank. I mean, there couldn't be 2 more different streams of work that exist out there. And he said, Darius, look, I know you don't know the industry, but I'm not looking for you to be an expert in the industry. I can train you to be an expert in the industry. What I'm looking to hire is a leader of leaders, and you're that. And I need and want your leadership within our organization. And so my wife and I prayed about it, man. And here's where I've drawn comfort from. I've found all throughout Scripture, that God has a way of choosing the least likely candidates for the biggest task.
Man, yeah, and I think for me, probably the biggest takeaway during this season of exploration of, okay, God, is it this? Is it that? I know you're asking and inviting me into the next season. I have no idea what that is. This was probably another time where both excitement and fear were present, if I'm honest, and it was going to take courage to take the next step. And because, I wasn't in a position where I hated my job. I wasn't like leaving because it was horrible. And there was there was so much tension that we couldn't coexist together. And, we were 2 number ones, all that stuff. Like, none of that existed for us. I mean, I could have been comfortable and stayed in this space for the long haul. But I sensed very clearly from the Lord that He was calling me into something different, man. And so,
that's for me, and even like I'm thinking about Rich Reed right now. He leaves being with a major tactical unit in law enforcement, and goes into business for it. It was so hard because it wasn't like he hated what he did. It wasn't like it's almost like that is more difficult than. I mean, it'd be one thing if y'all just had a big old fight and, you're white, I'm black, we're out of here, or something like that, but it wasn't that. I mean, you love him. I mean, you both still have unbelievable love for one another, and you're like, but there's just something in me that and I don't know what it is. And I love that. I love that you've taken and you've had the courage to step outside of what was comfortable, because you used that word. You said I could have stayed there and it would have been comfortable. But you stepped out. Yeah. So keep going.
Yeah, and I feel like, and you're right, Kevin. Like, I think that, to be frank, that is harder. And I think it's hard. It's easier when you hate a place. And I mean, anybody can be motivated by getting out of suck for better.
Right.
But when it doesn't suck and it's actually good, but you feel a sense of, I felt, I can say this for myself, I can speak for myself, I felt a sense of completion of the assignment. I feel like we're all on assignment, right? Like, and Ecclesiastes talks about this, but in the first chapter, to everything there's a time and a season. And man, I think what I've learned over the, I'm not an older man. I mean, I'm not old like you, but
that's right.
I got you. I'm with you. You're still young. In the years that I've lived, one of the things that I've learned is to be mindful of when the seasons are changing. And I see that in my parenting. I see that in my marriage. I see it in relationships. But man, seasons change. And I think it's our responsibility. This is part of what it means, in my opinion, to walk in step with the Spirit. This is what Paul's admonishment was, right? Like, so being mindful of like, okay, God, what are you calling us to? Was a big question for us. And here's what I've learned. God has a way of choosing the least likely candidates for the biggest task. And I am least likely to be in the banking industry, but on one hand, right? Like, but on the other hand, I feel like there is, and I've been in for over 5 months now, and there has been such clarity and such fulfillment in this new season. What God equips the called, right? Like, he's not calling you because you're equipped, but he's equipping you for the calling that he's placed on your life. And man, there's such excitement and fulfillment in this new season that we're in. And I get to work by the grace of God, man. I've gotten to assemble a great team at Red Rocks in the past 5 months. There were already really great people there, and I've gotten to add my Darius flair to the expression of our team. And I believe that God's doing great things, man. And I'm really excited about this new season. So, yep, I am in the credit union space, leading in that space as a senior executive at Red Rocks Credit Union, and loving it.
Well, and I love that. I had heard this quote a long time ago. It was from Norman Schwarzkopf, General Norman Schwarzkopf. And he said, life is a collection of seasons. And the mistake that the losers make is they try to hold on to the season that has already passed.
That's right.
And I think for me, I've tried to do that so many times. I've tried to hold on to the past season just because it is comfortable.
Yes.
And one of the things that I've with just longing and enjoying and loving being a dad, I really believe the greatest ability that any dad has is availability. And whether
That's
we
right.
feel equipped or not, just to be available. And that goes, from our relationships in the household, that goes to business. I wanted us really to spend some time, talking about, leadership. And, you and I were talking, I don't know what it was, a week or so ago. And, we were kind of catching up because, our paths hadn't crossed so much over the last, few months. And you're catching me up on all that's going on. And I just go, it's just you. It's you doing what you do. I mean, it's like, it doesn't really matter. Leadership transcends, the occupation. It transcends the title. It transcends, the widget that you're working with. It's who you are, and to hear where you are and what you're doing. So let's spend, a little bit of time just talking about leadership, especially in all that's going on right now. I mean, here we are, I don't know, we've been locked down for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I don't even know how long it's been. It's been a while. And, and so, leadership can take a lot of different looks, but, during this season of leadership in our world, dealing with COVID-19, dealing with relationships, dealing with Zoom calls like crazy.
Right.
Let's talk a little bit about that and how, in the end, leadership is leadership. So go ahead.
Yeah, man. I think, Kevin, you're so right. Like, one of the things that I have embraced during this season is just that. And leadership is leadership. It doesn't matter what sector you're in, what sphere of influence you're expressing that leadership. If you are leading or if you are influencing anything or anyone, you are leading. And um, I find so many similarities and so many overlaps in the expression of leadership in the business world as I did in the church, and I find so many overlaps in the church or business world as I do in my own home as a dad, right? Like working to be a badass dad is all, I mean, so much of it is about, to your point, availability, but it's about leadership.
Yep.
You know, I just sat and had a great conversation. Our kids are from 14 to 10, and we've got 4 of them. And, you know, I had a great leadership conversation essentially with our 13-year-old son, our oldest boy. And man, the more we can wrap our minds around, look, if I'm leading myself well, our first responsibility is always to lead ourselves well, right? You can't lead other people well if you can't lead yourself out of a wet paper bag. But our first responsibility is self-leadership. And I think, man, most of us as leaders have a hard time with learning what it means to lead ourselves well. And I think over the last 38 years for me, that's what it's been about. It's been about, okay, here's what, not just what it means to lead people. The first expression oftentimes for a young leader is to, man, how do I take these principles that I'm learning as a leader and now lead others well? No, the question is, how do I lead myself well?
Yep.
You know,
Love that.
How do I learn to navigate relationships well? How do I learn to navigate my financial life, my relationship with the Lord, right? Like my business well? How do I deliver on what I said I'm going to be able to promise, what I've promised, right? Like, how do I lead myself well, my health, I mean, there's so many aspects to self-leadership that really determine our capacity and our ceiling around leading others.
Yeah.
And so that dynamic, definitely in this season, specifically in the climate that we're in now, man, we're forced to be at home. And, you know, I've talked to some friends who, you know, have upped the alcohol intake and have upped the recreational use of marijuana intake and have upped the coping mechanisms, right? Like all the things that come, or up the eating intake,
right?
Because you're home and there's nothing necessarily to do. But I mean, this is a time for our country where I feel like, man, there's so many systems being stress tested. And that starts really at home first for us, right? Like your family home system is being stress tested because you're forced to be in however many square feet that you have with the however many number of people that are in that square footage of space for an undefinable period of time. And so now my home front is being stress tested, right? The leadership dynamics that I've expressed on the home front, and for so many of us, right? Like after school sports has covered up a multitude of sin for us, right? Like it's caused us to not have to engage with the people that we love. Work demands, being out of the house, you know, the time that we get away from each other. But man, I think more than anything, this time frame has really just tested, man, how strong is the family unit? How strong is your workout regimen? You know, what causes you to break down? And this is a time where our country, and that's from a business standpoint, same thing. You know, the amount of time we were talking about this kind of before the call, but the amount of time that businesses in our country, specifically, man, the restaurant industry, the hotel industry, some of the industries that were immediately impacted by this, you know, there are other industries that will be impacted by this more on the long-term front, depending on how long this continues. But man, some of the industries, churches, impacted immediately. I mean, that stress tests your systems, your leadership systems, right? Our lives are a combination of habits. That's what life boils down to for so many of us.
Yes.
It's a combination. The results that we get really are I'll say it this way. I'm reading this book called Atomic Habits.
Yep.
Your input determines your output, right? You get what you repeat. And so for so many of us, man, our systems aren't built to get the outcome that we really need or want. And so I'm looking at my family systems. I'm looking at my personal workout systems. I'm looking at my financial systems. For our company, I'm looking at our capacity to go remote in the matter of 48 hours, to get 60 people remote in 48 hours. I'm watching my pastor friends. Some are thriving in this space, and others are like, what the heck is the internet? You know?
Yeah.
What is Zoom? And
hey, stop that. Why are you messing with me?
not to say you did that 30 minutes ago before we started this call. I wouldn't dare say that. No, man, but it's all of this is leadership. And I think it starts with, man, like, what are your systems and what are the habits that we've generated and that we are living on that are giving us the outcome that we're getting? And there's no time more than this time that has invited us to reflect in that space than I can remember in the 38 years I've been on the earth, man.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to give you a chance to think about it a little bit, because I'm going to ask the question, but I'm going to answer it first. You know,
Sure.
the question is really, you know, in this time, what are some systems that you're developing? And we'll choose with kids, and then I want to do a separate one with our spouse as well. I mean, I hate to say that I have an advantage, but I have a little bit of an advantage because, I mean, Gretchen and I, for over 20 years, have worked together. Our entire married life, we have always worked together, you know? So, you know, we've been fortunate that when we were in the office, we were in the office together. I mean, we went like, I don't remember, 2 or 3 years with one car. So we drove together. We ate, you know, I mean, so it was 24/7. So
that's why you guys are so incredible.
Well, okay, I don't know about all that, but you know, things did change, you know, once we got our boys. But, you know, so I think we had some advantages on that, and we've really enjoyed the time. You know, it's kind of us going back. But, you know, the question is kind of, what are some ideas with the kids? So I'll tell you some of the things that I did, because I decided – now, you didn't use this exact word, but you kind of went toward it. But it was extreme ownership. I went Jocko Willink, extreme ownership, and said, okay, what can I, you know, if it's going to change, everything rises and falls on the level of my leadership. And so I started with education with my kids. And, you know, they have all the online stuff is wonderful. And I've been frustrated as a former math teacher. I've been frustrated with how math has been taught. I'm like, this is my chance to take over math. Okay?
Right.
So, you know, so I started them. It's kind of fun. I just went online and Googled, you know, some sheets that I wanted, you know, some basic facts. I mean, you know, I got, you know, somebody, you have a 7th grader and then I have a 3rd grader, you know, wanted to get on that. So we got on that. And then the other thing that I wanted to do was I wanted them to really start working on some memorization. So I'm actually having Jacob memorize the poem. It's a pretty lengthy poem by Kipling called If, and IF, so if. And so I'm gonna have a little thing where I'm gonna let him do it. But it's, you know, it really gives some great characteristics of being a man throughout the poem. And so I gave them a couple of different things through that as well. So you know, the other thing that I've done, just, you know, building in some structure for it. And really, even for Gretchen, is, you know, for me to take the boys, like I took the boys yesterday and we went to the park, you know, and, you know, I tried to keep my distance or whatever, but, you know, it was just us. It was just the boys and I going out and doing it. You know, I've exposed myself to some my weaknesses, which one of them was anything dealing with power tools. So we did a little woodworking thing, which was so far outside of my comfort zone. But anyway, that's just been a couple things that we've been able to do. So talk to me a little bit about, you know, with the kids. So,
man,
and you got a balance. You got 2 and 2, so, you know, it's a little different, but, you know,
we got 2 and 2, man. And you're right. You know, when this stuff started happening, I mean, we were off the first week. This, you know, the coronavirus hit. Our kids were going on spring break, and so we unlike some parents around the world had a bit of a head start because we got a week to prepare, if you will. So we gave them that week off. If I had it my way, we wouldn't have. We would have went right into online learning. But My wife was like, nope, she vetoed that. And she's like, no, we're giving them time off, Mr. Drill Sergeant. But no, I feel like this time it has been a gift in so many ways. You know, we had a conversation with our kids around the dinner table about, you know, hey, let's embrace the suck. And what's the suck of this situation? And we, you know, because I firmly believe in not sugarcoating situations or making something, kind of doing the Jedi mind trick and trying to make something good that's really bad and hard.
Yeah.
You know, and so, hey, let's talk about what's hard about this situation. And that kind of gave them an opportunity to just be real about it and say, hey, this isn't good. It's not good that we can't go to school and be with our friends. It's not good that, you know, my daughter's an 8th grader and she can't graduate, so to speak. She's going to graduate, but there's no ceremony. There's no, you know, getting out of school early the last week because she's at the top of the food chain. So all of those things, you know, sports seasons having to end early and so on and so forth. And so we got to grieve the situation. And then what we're doing is then we talked about, all right, just in every situation, there's good and bad, right? Like, so what's the bad, what's the hard, and then what's the good? And so the good is, man, we've gotten more time to be with our kids. And that stresses mom and dad a little bit more. But the bright side is we get to your point, we get to kind of supplement some of the education that our kids are getting, and they get a great education at school. But man, so we've instituted, we've kind of gotten creative around some of the reading dynamics and literacy dynamics. And each of our kids, we have tasked each of them to read a specific book that we get to choose, and they get to buy into it. They get to say yes or no, but we chose, and they're incentivized. And so we pay them a certain amount of money to, on top of their other schoolwork, to finish this book in a certain period of time, write a report on it. So a 1 to 2 page summary. And man, it's just been really cool from 14 to 10 to see them engage in this in a different way. Math, you know, Jay was a former teacher. And so she's got all sorts of creative ways to teach different subjects. And all of this is supplemental to what their teachers are doing. But then kind of during the day, we also take breaks. Fun breaks, you know, we've got the PE dynamic happening where we'll do a family walk or a family bike ride real quick, or walk the dog, or just get a game of soccer in the backyard. It's just been fun to augment work on my end and teacher, you know, to be both boss, employee, and teacher at the same time.
Okay, so real quick, I'll put you on the spot. So what's the book that Daniel's reading? Your 13-year-old, what's he reading?
He's reading a book called Beyond Colorblind, which is such a good read. Obviously, being a Black young man in a predominantly white space, just understanding the dynamics of what it means to be, to own your identity, your ethnic identity, and how to embrace others as well. Is a book that he's reading, and I actually get the report tonight at 8, and I can't wait.
Oh, that's awesome. That is so much fun. Well, good. Well, let's, you know, one of the things that I have long admired about you, because, you know, I just got to say, it's so much fun to see you in your new house. Okay. Because when let's see, we had to have met 9 years ago. I think it is 8, 9 years ago. 9 years ago. Okay. You know, you guys were just transitioning out here, and I remember y'all were all in that. You were in that first little apartment. You were together, and you guys were hustling. I think Jay was working like 2 or 3 jobs. You were working 2 or 3 jobs. You were trying to get things going, and now to see you in this gorgeous, like, brand new house, is just so special to see. But you know, as I think about what makes Darius is, especially from a leadership standpoint, is he just figures it out. It just, like, whatever it takes. And I think that's a key element in leadership. And so where does that come from? Where does that just, I will do whatever it takes?
Man, First, thank you, man. You're gonna get me tearing up on Badass Dads podcast.
And you can't tell the story when we first met, so that doesn't work. So I can edit all that out.
I am gonna tell the story, man. Man. So, Kevin, I have not been asked that question often, but here's where I think we all stand on the shoulders of those who came before us, right? I think at the end of the day, good or bad, man, we stand on the shoulders of those who sacrificed blood, sweat, and tears and came before us and building really a path for us. And so, I mean, I think about my aunts, my uncles, my parents, my grandparents, my ancestors. I think about my mentors, so many people who have modeled for me my friends, what it looks like to not only set the goal, but to do whatever it takes to attain it. And, I think perseverance, to be frank, long suffering, man, is a fruit of the Spirit. And my hope and aim is to be able to long suffer in ways that, kind of what I said earlier, Eugene Peterson, that kind of long, hard obedience in the same direction. I am a firm believer in that. I am. I've seen it work. I've seen, sometimes I think in life and in leadership, it's just being those who win or those who last. Like, are you willing to go through what you need to go through to be the last man standing? It's kind of the Rocky analogy or illustration, being tough skinned, not a thin skinned guy, being able to endure some of the heartache and the pain. I was just talking to Daniel, my oldest son, this morning around that, but I mean, perseverance, being able to endure and go through and not fold under that pressure is you learn that the earlier you learn that, the better, because there are going to be peaks and valleys. And the deal is when you're on the mountaintop, when you're on that peak, is to not get too excited. Like don't put too much onus on being on the peak, because guess what? Tomorrow there's coming a valley's coming, dude. And so being able to navigate life in a way that kind of is in that in-between space of, I'm not getting too high and I'm not getting too low. I'm not the guy who's I'm an optimist. I'm an eternal optimist. That's probably another thing that helps me. Like I'm the glass half full guy. I'm not the glass half empty guy. I've never been. And so I just believe that there's so much good in each situation, even when it sucks, right? Kind of what I just talked about, that's a value that runs pretty deep in me. And so, man, it's been sweet to see a value that I've clung to be proven time and time again. I think that's where the value comes from, that, hey, this thing runs pretty deep in me because I've seen it work time and time again. And so where does that come from? Man, I think hopefully it stems from my faith and trust in the Lord. And two, I think it stems from some of the experiences that I've had in life that have taught me, hey, just stay in the ring. You don't have to, you don't have to throw a no-hitter. You don't have to shoot a perfect game. You don't have to have made every tackle, but you got to keep getting back up, right? Yeah. And so when life throws you the punches that it throws you, and you can rest assured that, I mean, anybody listening to this podcast understands that, man, you're going to get some punches thrown at you, but your ability to get back up, our ability to get back up and keep swinging and keep standing, and sometimes limping through it, man, really determines our ability to achieve and to succeed in what God's called us to.
Well, I love what you said there, because, one of the other great abilities as a badass dad is you got to have some stickability. just ability to just stick in there. I'm going to tell you, here's actually where it came from. You probably won't remember this because you were so young.
Whatever, man.
But the great philosopher,
Kevin, you only have 12 years on me. 12.
But the great philosopher from Public Enemy, Chuck D, said, "Don't let a win go to your head or a loss to your heart." And I think it's so true because, I think one of the key tenets of being a badass dad is get excited. Hey, we won the game. Let's celebrate. And when there's the suck, okay, yes, it does suck. But I don't know. As I think about you, you have such a great strategic mind that it's all right. Okay, this does suck, but let's figure it out. Let's figure out a way, to get it done. And I've seen you do that. In the church, I haven't seen, but I know you're doing it in business. I've seen you do it on the football field as well, and just figuring it out, even when you got the haters out there going a different direction. So, and that's what I dig about Darius Wise.
Man, I appreciate that. And Kevin, I would say the same for you. I mean, for you and so many, you're right, man. So many dads that I know who have that capacity and carry that trait. I said this earlier, but and I wanted to, you can have him edit this however you want to. There's two things I want to say.
Yeah. Well, no one's going to listen to this anyway, so don't worry about it. It's just you and I.
I know. It's just you and me. But as it pertains to God choosing the most unlikely candidates for the biggest task, I think about how God chose you, a guy who grew up without a dad, to birth a massive ministry to dads, right? And
well, I don't use the M word, but yes.
Right. I know. You don't use the M word, but I use the M word. Okay.
Yes.
But to start this dad movement, right?
Yeah.
Like you would expect the guy who grew up with the amazing father, and to do something like this, but here it is that not only has God used you to start this movement for dads, for badass dads, and highlight a segment of our society that really gets thrown under the bus so much. Most dads are told how bad they are at what they do, or how not present they are, to where to a point to where they just stop showing up. But not only are you leading this movement, man, and you're leading it well, but you're also a badass dad. I just think that's the dynamic I get at when I say unlikely candidate for a massive God-sized dream and task. And that's encouraging to me, man. So it's guys like you that encourage me to stay in the fight. There you go again.
I don't know, man. I'm sweating. I'm sweating.
My eyes are sweating. To stay in the fight and keep pursuing dreams, right? So, and then the other thing I'll say around my transition from Denver United, man, and really me starting at DU, man, I've got a pub Rob Brindle, because I mean, it took some courage for a guy pastoring an all-white church. Yeah, everybody's got a vision for multiculturalism or to bridge the racial divide, but not everybody's got the courage to take the risk. And Rob Brindle took a risk, and I'm just grateful to him and to the body at DU for taking a risk and allowing me and my family to be a part of something really special for a long period of time. And so really grateful for those guys.
Well, yeah, and I feel like this could turn into like this huge love affair for Rob Brindle. There's no doubt. I mean, he's had a tremendous impact on us for quite a while as well. So I want to wrap it up a little bit, but I want to also thank you. As my good friend Reed Perry shared, he's one of the few people that I had on the podcast, and he started asking me questions. I was like, whoa, you can't ask me questions. This is me interviewing you. But he asked me what was the commonality, with all the guys, and you really have demonstrated here. And the word that he used was being a refuser, just refusing to accept where you came from. You know, we didn't really talk through the story, but like when you're going to school, you know, in I think it was first grade, and your mom leaves, and like that's it.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like what do you mean? What do you mean you're leaving? You know, and with dad, and then you know, new mom and new brothers and all this kind of stuff, and then going to Atlanta. You just refused to stay where you were, and you stayed open, you know, to the direction that God wanted to take you. And I just love that. You are absolutely a badass dad. And I am so thankful. You know, one of the first articles that I wrote, I think you remember, I wrote an article called The 45-Second Friend, and it was birthed out of the conversation. I shot you that text. You know, you remember I said, hey, D, you got 45 seconds. You know, I just need to run something by you. And so you are in my band of brothers. So I thank you for being part of my band of brothers I can call out and reach out to. So thank you.
Man, Kevin, you and Gretchen are family and friends forever, man. Thanks for being a part of my life, and thanks for being a guy that I'll never forget. The book, this may be the first and only book you've given me, but Chase the Lion. It's such a demonstration of who you are as a man and who Gretchen is, what you guys represent as a family, and that's. I would say the same to you, just this refuser, this unwillingness to accept status quo and keep chasing the lion. So thank you, man.
That's awesome. Hey guys, please check us out on YouTube. If you're hearing it on the podcast, or if you're on the YouTube, check us out on the, wherever you get podcasts as well. You can, hey Darius, if people want to connect with you, is there a way they can connect with you? If they want to shoot you an email or something? Is there some way?
Absolutely. Follow me on Instagram at Darius Wise 2.
Darius Wise 2 at Instagram. Gotcha. We'll do that. Well, hey guys, take care of your family. Get out there. You know, I love that we spent quite a bit of time talking about leadership, and you know, you stay healthy. Just get out there, and as our good friend Kyle Gillian has been leading the example, get out there, do your burpees. No one can do your burpees for you, so you got to do your burpees for yourself. And but we are a band of brothers committed to forging stronger fathers here at Badass Dads. So I encourage you, be a badass dad and have a badass week. And we are out. Hey guys, I want to thank you guys again just for listening to this episode of Badass Dads. Hey, if you found this episode helpful, if it's beneficial, if it's shareable, man, we'd love for you to pass it on to someone. You know, previous episodes you can check out on our podcast page, on iTunes, on Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, check out our website, BadAssDads.org. That's BadAssDads.org. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram pages. So please, love the support. Check all that out. Let's get this movement going. And we are committed to forging stronger fathers. Be a part of the movement. We're out.